I said there's a part at the beginning of this where David Lloyd, the artist, writes a little foreword, and I thought it was really interesting, so I'm going to read it. Might be a little edited. I want to read it. A few nights ago, I walked into a pub on the way home and ordered a Guinness. I didn't look at my watch, but I knew it was before 8 o'clock. It was Tuesday, and I could hear the television in the background still running the latest episode of EastEnders, a soap about day-to-day life of a cheeky, cheery working-class people in a decaying, mythical part of London. It wasn't a busy night. I could hear the murmuring of the distant TV above the chatter of the people at the bar and the click-clack of colliding snooker balls. After EastEnders came Porridge, a rerun of a situational comedy series about a cheeky, cheery prisoner in a comfortably unoppressive, decaying Victorian prison. I finished my drink. I looked up at the barman caught my eye. "Guinness?" he asked, almost reaching for a fresh glass. I nodded. The barman's wife arrived and began to help with the trickle of customers' orders. At 8:30, following Porridge, came A Question of Sport, a simple panel quiz game featuring a cheeky, cheery sports celebrities answering questions about other sports celebrities, many of whom were as cheeky and cheery as themselves. Jocularity reigned. The 9 o'clock news followed A Question of Sport. Or at least 30 seconds of it did, before the television was switched off and a cheeky, cheery pop music took its place. I looked over at the barman. "Just half this time," I said. As he filled the glass, I solemnly asked why he'd switched off the news. "Don't ask me, that was my wife," he replied in a cheeky, cheery manner. I finished my drink and left, almost certain the TV would be silent for the rest of the evening. For after the 9 o'clock news would have come The Boys from Brazil, a film with few cheeky, cheery characters in it. There aren't many cheeky, cheery characters in V for Vendetta either, and it's for the people who don't turn off the news. Bum bum bum, literature gets a look. Legs talk about books.
Hello and welcome to Legs Talk About Books, the monthly literature podcast where we talk about books. I'm CB Radio answering this time, and my partner in crime is...
Hardleg Joe. Hello. Good job on that intro, by the way.
I know, it only took me second try.
It only took you 2 tries. Considering you didn't come up with it, that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
It's hard to learn other people's intros. Anyway, welcome to the episode. If you're new here, there's not really much to explain that the intro didn't explain already, is there?
Other than the fact that this is December this time, and in December we tend to go for
graphic novels. Yeah. December is graphic novel month because obviously there's the holidays, everyone's busy, and graphic novels generally take less time to get through than like a full novel.
And we never choose cheery ones for some odd reason.
Not yet. I mean, this is arguably cheerier than last year, which was Mouse.
We gotta keep the theme of Nazis going
we still got fascism. There's been fascism every year. Although, to be fair, we didn't actually pick this book, not entirely. We had a poll on Twitter. There were several different choices, and this is what the viewers chose. So, if you're interested in helping us pick episodes in the future, we're going to be doing more Twitter polls. Follow me on Twitter. It's should be down in the description. Or you can join the Patreon. Every $1 patron gets on my Discord. The people on the Discord are actually the ones that picked all the different ideas that I put on the poll.
All right.
So there's a lot of things. But yes, today, V for Vendetta, a comic book by Alan Moore and David Lloyd. Written in the 80s, famously turned into a movie in the 2000s by the Wachowskis.
Yeah.
Who were the people who made The Matrix, if you're unaware, and Speed Racer.
Those are very, very different movies, but we'll get into that
and
later.
Of course, probably most famously known for the Guy Fawkes mask, which has kind of come to be known as the anonymous mask these days.
It's just kind of anarchist a little bit.
I don't know. One of the few questions I got from the Discord when I asked people if they had any discussion points was asking me what I thought about how far the mask had come. From being an anarchist symbol in this book to kind of being associated with, as they put it, 4chan incels.
I mean, that's just one way to look at it. People have adopted it into kind of an anarchist ideal of they get to do what they want, and if you want to be an incel, that's your prerogative.
I don't know. I would argue, obviously, I think 4chan kind of is associated with it. They're associated with Anonymous, which is kind of a hacking group, and also just a bunch of random people who do whatever. I don't see it as cringy as a lot of other people do, because I think it's open to being interpreted by different people. But I did have another thing on Twitter where I asked people their thoughts about it, and about half of them say that the image just kind of makes them feel cringy now, that they don't really respect it. It makes them think of edgelords.
I mean, yeah, but for me, it makes me uncomfortable simply because, well, first off, after reading this book and
understanding the origins,
but also that smile is just very unnerving, because it's just this constant, like, rosy-cheeked, and yet somehow there's something
somehow ominous,
somehow shifty as hell behind it. But
it's kind of taken on a similar thing as, like, the Joker.
Yeah.
Where there are still some people who see the Joker as this symbol of, like, chaos, who think he's almost terrifying or scary, or like an example of humankind's destructive nature. And other people, like me, all I can think about is, I'm the Joker, baby!
Yeah! Wanna get nuts?
Oh, have you not seen that?
No, I have not.
One second. We're gonna pause the episode. I'm gonna show Brandon something.
Wanna know how I got these scars? Well, I'm the Joker, baby.
Oh, God. I can't go farther.
That's all there is to it.
Oh.
Just the best performance of the Joker. Some guy in a high school like, I'm the Joker, baby! Ha-ha!
Oh, God, that hurts. Oh, as a person who really liked doing the monologue of how I got these scars in a kind of very, very, like, Heath Ledger, just using the smacking lips, because I liked you didn't put any thought into it, you didn't put any heart.
And that's what I'm saying, there's,
didn't study at all.
When you think about the Joker, there's people who think like Mark Hamill and Heath Ledger, and there's people who think that guy. And it's the same thing kind of with V for Vendetta. There's some people that think of the movie, the comic, and then there's all the edgelords who sort of like played Never Gonna Give You Up outside of a Scientology building once.
Oh, God. Can we just move on to the fascism so I'm not as creeped out?
This intro's going on quite... Yeah. I guess we should, for people who are unfamiliar with the format of this show, usually we start by giving some spoiler-free thoughts, a little review of the material, if you will, and then from there we're just going to discuss all the different things that we found interesting about it. We're not going to give a synopsis at any point. We're going to assume either you've already read it or you're just not going to read it, and then I hope you got to catch up. Good luck. So yes, Brandon, why don't we start with you since you started the episode? What were your thoughts about this?
Well, I went into it actually seeing the movie first, and you'd said you'd seen only bits and pieces of it.
Yeah.
And so I'd already known about the direction of this book and how it was going to go. But it actually surprised me in a lot of sections. Just the amount of extra stuff that I'm learning from it is a little bit more jarring than I thought it would be. Just, it's kind of like an onion. The more I peel back from it, the more I find of it.
Yeah. The movie is, at least from what I've seen and from what I've heard of people, not bad. And we'll get into this more when we get into spoilers, because then we can discuss it fully. But from what I understand, it's a very different beast than the comic book. And the comic book has a lot more to unpack. It's a lot more... I'd say, like, universal would be the good word. Like, this was written in the 80s, and it kind of holds up now, whereas the movie was written in the 2000s, and kind of speaks specifically to a 2000s mindset.
Yeah. But yeah, that's how I see it. How did you come out of it?
Well, I should say, usually when you review things, you give things like a number scale, don't you?
Oh, yeah, I do give a number scale on this one. I would give this one about 4 Guy Fawkes Maxes out of 5.
4 out of 5?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty nice. I couldn't remember what your scale is. I think we've kind of fallen off
We just kind of, like, I'm doing whatever I want to. I'm being very anarchist about my scale.
I have an anarchist scale. It's nothing but chaos and disorder. And, I've never had, like, a scale like that. I have always been... Mine's been more of, like, a spectrum. A 2-axis grid where you march, like, 4 different things. And, with this, I would say, the characters kind of fall flat. It's not something where you read it and you really feel for the characters and you really get invested in their story. It's something you read more for, like, the political commentary, almost. I think that the intro, if we kept that in, is a good example. This is for people who don't want to turn off the news.
Yeah.
It's certainly got some exciting fights. It's got some interesting plot developments. But really, you're reading this to sort of learn about fascism, about people, about anarchy. And
that was one thing I also was very much surprised with. Like, I expected to go into this one being like, I've seen the movie, I'll be able to get through a bunch of this, and then I open it up and the word count is staggering. Like, I'm expecting like, oh, there's gonna be a couple fight scenes, and like, no. The amount of action in this is minimal comparatively to the dialogue that they're just thrown at you.
Well, there is still a lot of very
striking imagery,
a lot of storytelling without dialogue, which actually does kind of put this, in addition to being, we're going to give you a point or a message more than a story or characters. Like, it still has those things, but the point is clearly more important than that. It also pretty, I won't say experimental, but at least from a mechanical standpoint, they're doing a lot here with light and shadows, and they're doing a lot with how they're storytelling in both these frames without any text, but also, like, there's no thought bubbles in this.
Yeah.
There's not really much narration. All the narration comes from someone speaking to someone else, or you're hearing something from the TV, or you're hearing an announcement over a loudspeaker. Everything's diegetic, is the word. And again, the modern comics, like, you'll read them now, they kind of just do that automatically. But if you go back to the late 70s, early 80s, this is like a vision of the future almost.
Yeah.
So it seems really...
Not my future, but...
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, as far as the mechanics go, as far as the technical issues, seems really basic now, but at the time it was kind of revolutionary.
Yes, but I think we've gone long enough in this introduction. From
Yeah,
this point on, we are going to be doing some heavy spoilers in this. So if you haven't read it yet, go back and read this book. It is really fun.
I would recommend it, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, just be aware of what you're getting into. If you're looking for, like, the compelling story of the brave hero V, you're not gonna get it.
Yeah, this is the news, and it's not easy to take.
It's not easy to take sometimes, but it is important to discuss. You gotta have both in your life. We've read enough fantasy, where it was just goofy shit.
We've read some stuff where, like, everything turns out right in the end, and everything's gonna be all right. This ain't one of those.
No cheeky, cheery characters here.
Yeah.
Or very few of them. I guess there was that one guy who got, like, turned into a doll, kinda.
I don't think that's a cheeky cherry way to go, though.
I don't know, it was really goofy compared to everything else that happened.
I mean, okay, yeah, his reasoning, the reason behind why it happened to him on that one is really interesting, I'd say. That's a big difference that they chose in the movie. In the movie, they just off him.
Well, I said, I think that's probably for the best in the movie's favor, because in the comic book it came across as, like, kind of really goofy.
It does come off as goofy and kind of mustache twirly to do something like that.
Yeah.
At that point, but also, like, the reason behind why it happens is actually pretty damning and pretty interesting because, well, to put the basis of the story on this one, V, you find out the backstory from him is that he was a part of an experiment in these...
concentration camps.
Basically concentration camps.
Yeah.
But one of the characters who is this voice of fate, who is like this radio broadcaster.
He's the voice of the fascist regime, essentially.
Yeah, they have them all neatly named as the nose, the eyes, the fingers, the voice.
Yeah.
And he was the guard there, and he would be in charge of keeping everybody in line, and obviously throwing people into the furnaces when they're done with them.
Or at least leading them to the furnaces.
And you find out early in his present day, he is a fan of dolls.
He's a big doll collector.
Yeah, because they were these dolls that were before the war, this big blanket war that caused all the problems.
The nuclear war, yeah.
Yeah, and he...
Africa's just not there anymore.
Yeah. They never really explained anything, but but this voice actor never had any qualms with throwing people into the furnace. But then V steals all of the dolls of his collection and throws them into the furnace and sets them on fire, and he loses it. And it's a great way of showing how he's viewed these people that he was killing as less than objects.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting way, I thought.
Well, it's also, they didn't really mention it all that much. It was kind of hinted at, but going back through it, I think he also gave him the same drugs that V took, the ones that are, like, akin to LSD almost.
Really?
Yeah. That's why it affected him so harshly. It wasn't just that, seeing his doll collection burned in a mock-up of the crematoriums. It was seeing that while also being on LSD.
Okay, all right, I get that now a little bit. I didn't catch that on there.
They don't really... The thing is, he just barely mentions the name of the drug, and the name doesn't mean anything to you at the moment, because you don't find out about it until, like, book 2, when they go into V's backstory.
Admittedly, it feels like magically LSD, because he got superpowers somehow.
Yeah, well, they talk about V's superpowers sort of coming from this experimental drug that was used on him, and they say the effects are similar to... They compare it to both LSD, but they also say it's kind of like schizophrenia. They're like, his consciousness is detached from the rest of him. He sort of feels like he's watching himself in third person, and that gives him insight that other people don't have.
But that also doesn't explain how he's slightly stronger and faster than most, and it's just...
Well, they also mentioned the same drugs, in addition to having those mental side effects that most people went mad from, they also have horrible mutating effects physically, where they talk about people growing other arms or like melting or getting like tumors all over them, and it was different for each person. And I think 90% of the people inflicted with it just died. What was it? They're like 90% of the people died outright, and then there were like 10% left, and most of them mutated into horrible things and died. And V was the only one whose like body didn't seem to go under any changes.
And it's funny that, like, the one time you get his face described is when the nice doctor up at the this place sees it and is just like, "Oh, you're so beautiful."
You're so beautiful.
I'm like, okay, that's really helpful.
Maybe it's because underneath that mask is an idea.
Damn it,
and the idea was beautiful. And
no.
she finally got to see him for the idea he represented.
No.
Although that is an excellent example of what I was talking about earlier, as far as where it's like, V doesn't feel as much like a character. He feels more like an idea.
Yeah.
He represents some things.
He's Batman, essentially.
Somewhat. I mean, Batman still has some character stuff. Although before we get into Batman, we should... Because that was one of the big differences between V in the comic book and V in the movie. At least from what I've seen of it. Because there's, like, the clip in the movie of, like, V making Evie breakfast.
Yeah.
And, like, being more goofy and watching a movie together. And they went out of their way in the movie to sort of make him more personable.
Yeah. They also made his Vendetta, in the movie to be a bit more derived from himself and kind of more of a blanket warm fuzzy feel at the end. Whereas in this book, it's very much more of the dark and gritty Alan Moore perspective on anarchy, which, to be honest, he didn't describe the greatest.
He didn't explain it well. Although, to be fair, it's like, I can't really blame him writing this in the 80s because he didn't have access to the same kind of, like, looking up information that we have.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to find out about anarchy, which I have been looking up all different political ideologies the last, like, year, I've gotten profoundly interested in politics since our Civil War book last year.
Oh, yeah, no, I've seen the
transformation.
The slow mutation. You have ears in places that you should not. You've been taking this strange drug, Joe.
My third eye.
Oh, God, no.
And
God.
also my dick. But that's unrelated. But,
it's like a tentacle. No,
we're gonna go off to... But yeah, the point is, I've been looking up all sorts of different political ideologies, and because I have YouTube or whatever, I have the benefit of being able to look up, like, what do anarchists actually believe? Because I've always heard that, like, it's an ideology, but from as long as I can remember, I've always heard it described as, like, a transitionary thing.
Yeah.
Anarchists want to destroy the world so they can build up something new. And obviously that wouldn't be anarchy anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't understand how you could be an anarchist unless you just like to break shit. And I think that's the idea that most people get from anarchists, that anarchists are just like the guy in the hoodie with the bat and the Molotov cocktail.
Yeah.
Who just want to blow everything up. But I think the most accurate description I've heard of it is anarchists don't believe in hierarchies.
Yeah.
So when you talk about, like, democracy, in America we have a democracy where we can vote for the leaders, and then the leaders have a hierarchy above us. Like, politicians have more power than you or I do. they get to make the decisions. Like, we put them in that position, but once they're in there, whatever their term limit is,
theirs.
They got control. And, while they're up there, it's like, if I punched them in the face, or, like, threatened to punch them in the face, I would go to jail for a long time. But they could punch me in the face, and it would be the same as assaulting another citizen.
Mm-hmm.
So they have, like, power and authority over you, and obviously the higher up you get, the more. So an anarchist would say, like, what we need is a pure, direct democracy. No one elects leaders. It's whenever there's an issue, we bring it to everyone. Everyone gets one vote. Everyone's equal. So when they talk about, like, there's no government, it's not that there's actually no government or no laws. It's that every citizen in the country is an equal part of the government, so there's no difference between being a citizen and being a member of the government. The hierarchies are flattened. We're all equal.
And you don't really get that from V for Vendetta.
No, he doesn't. He mostly talks about destroying things so we can start over again.
And being really upset with justice and mistresses and weird crap like that.
Although,
he's also incredibly theatrical in both versions. He is this very using the theatrics of his actions to soften the edge of how much he hates what he's around.
Yeah. He's using the theatrics to make his destruction seem more lively and interesting and less like being a terrorist.
And I also...
Because, he is a terrorist. He's a terrorist against the Nazis, essentially. Mm-hmm. So it's slightly more justifiable. But he does still just blow up, like, stuff.
Well, I'm talking about more on a character basis, less on an action basis. It seems that he uses his flamboyant nature to offset his anger. What it seems that boils inside of him at every moment against everything around him. So he uses that very flamboyant nature is that kind of like that, what you said the drug did?
Yeah.
Where it makes it seem like he's watching himself on a television show.
He's seeing himself as an actor in a play as opposed to experiencing it generally. I mean, that's how they did it in the movie. At least, again, from what I understand, I've seen bits of it.
And the book seems to do it as well, because his very personality, like, even Evie gets freaking pissed at him about how much he just doesn't give a straight answer, and he has to be all theatrical.
Well, see, that's why I think in the book it's genuine. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's like him acting that way to keep his real emotions at arm's length. I think it's his brain has been so messed up that he's no longer a person. He thinks of himself as an ideal, and he doesn't have wants or desires. He doesn't ever seem to have, like, a satisfaction when he kills someone.
Yeah.
It's more just sort of like something that needs to be done for the sake of what he wants to accomplish.
I wouldn't say that. He did sound like he took a certain satisfaction about cultivating a rose for the leader.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know, it's hard to tell. That's one of the things that you miss in a comic book is, like, the tone of voice.
Especially when your character has literally no facial expressions.
Yeah.
But smiling at all times.
It's really hard to tell.
Also, speaking of that smile, when Evie puts that on, it is the creepiest panel of the entire book.
I liked it. I thought it was neat.
I know, I liked it, but it was also incredibly unnerving to see a human, what is essentially a human face in this story,
doing the same smile as the mask.
Taking on the dimples and just the...
well, they had to show that she was V
now.
Ooh.
That is let's get on to the idea of how, like, the book is very different from the movie. We've been on this subject for a little bit now. But definitely the ending is where it draws away, I'd say, the most drastically.
Yeah. Because in both the book and the movie, they make a point. There's that famous speech that he gives on TV, which is very different between these two.
Yes.
But has the same general idea, which is, I don't blame the fascists for taking power. I blame you, the people, for sitting back and watching your cheeky, cheery shows while it happened and not standing up against them. Because if you stand up in mass, the government can't stop you. Does he say it in this or just the movie? Government should be afraid of their people.
He says it in only the movie. In the book, he paints it as very much just like, you fools, you did this to yourself. Whereas in the movie, it's kind of like, you did this to yourself. but you can change it.
Yeah.
Go on, get out there, do it.
The big difference is, in the movie there is a call to action. He tells them to do something, and the ending is jovial. It's more exciting and happy, because at the end they do what he says.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out nice. The people, the government doesn't shoot everyone, because they're like, there's so many and we don't have any commands.
Yeah, the government is overthrown with flowers in the guns and everything's great.
Yeah, in this, it ends with, like, everything is descending into chaos, and V and Evie, V's dead in both cases, but Evie is like, I'm going to try to make a better world. There's a lot of people in here who seem to be interested in trying to do things better, or at least not having the same kind of fascist government that you had before. But it's left ambiguous as to whether or not they'll actually do it, or if something worse will just show up. The last panel is a guy walking on down a highway to leave the city, because he's just through with society in general, I guess.
Yeah, it's and also Evie's part in the movie is she just narrates like, V was everyone, he was everyone, and in the book she just takes up the mantle and just it starts the cycle all over again.
It's a good example of one of the things that makes this book both so resonating and also kind of weakens it in regard to all the anarchy stuff, is just the fact that Alan Moore is on the record for saying he didn't want to tell people what to think. He wanted to present his ideas, but he didn't want to say, like, and they end up good. He's like, it's up to you to decide how to implement them, and whether or not they turn out good is going to depend on that implementation, not on the ideas themselves. And I think that it's a positive, because it allows people to think about things and how they want to do things. It's not putting everyone in a box. But at the same time, then you've got this very dark, dour ending.
Yes.
Where if you weren't more thoughtful about it, you might see this as like, oh, and then I guess civilization collapsed.
Yeah, it's doesn't really paint a good picture of humanity at the same time as it also tries to paint a good picture of humanity.
It's weird because because it ends ambiguously, it really is kind of like a litmus test of like, how much hope do you personally have? This is a good ending if you believe that people will work together and build something better, even in the absence of leadership.
I mean, when they're killing people in that way, and it's just like, it just reminds me of like Tsarist Russia getting torn down, and the entire Tsarist, like even the little kids getting murdered, and this, like, that's just yeah.
And it's like, well, you had good ideas, communists, but you didn't quite put them into effect as well as you had hoped, and then you get Stalin. And then it's like, well, it's not quite fascism, but you still got an authoritarian leader who's doing some pretty shifty shit, which is not something you want to do. But this isn't hard-leg politics, is it?
This is not hard-leg politics. This is hard-leg literature.
Okay.
So,
about the characters, I guess going back to them, or rather the kind of lack of characters.
The lack of flavor in the characters. They're very much just like, hey, they're the fascists, they're naive, or they are
assholes,
or they're the anarchists.
Or they're, well, I mean, it's not even just that, because it's like, we've already talked about how V is an idea, but then even Evie, who's I guess sort of like the audience surrogate, who knows
at the beginning.
Knows almost nothing, and then sort of gets more indoctrinated by V the more she hangs out with them, the more she learns about life. Hey, she learns all sorts of things.
Yeah.
About drug dealing, too. And that one guy got stabbed with a sword through the mailbox. That was interesting.
I don't remember that part.
The one guy that she hangs out with when V kicks her out.
Just got a scimitar to the chest. Yeah.
Yep, brutal. But yeah, the point is, she doesn't really form a character. I mean, you kind of identify her with her when she's in the prison. But other than that, her character, like, I can't really name a big personality trait about her.
She's young, and that is it.
She's young. She generally doesn't want to do violence. But sometimes she feels compelled to when bad things happen, as we all do from time to time.
She never really gives into the violence.
She almost does, and then V stops her.
Yeah.
Because V wants every generation wants the next generation to be slightly better than they are. And And so even though she takes up the V mantle, she has she's the non-violent V.
Mm-hmm. She's the island.
Yeah, I guess. Wait, what?
Oh, it's when you take V out of violent?
Oh. I thought you said she's an island.
No,
I was like,
no.
what? Are we calling back to Whom the Bell Tolls? That's a completely different thing.
No.
But yeah, so Evie just like not very interesting, not very compelling as a character. And then they focus a lot on the bad guys, the fascist or the people living under fascism. And he does a really good job of painting them as like regular people.
Yeah.
Like he said in that interview, he's like, the Nazis weren't from space, they weren't from hell. They were school teachers, they were truck drivers, they were regular people who got caught up in something, either because they just wanted power for themselves and they didn't really care how they got it, or because they genuinely believed that this would help them somehow, or help the world somehow.
Or they were just scared from...
Yeah, or they were just scared. They were scared, or they were cowards. Mm-hmm. There's so many reasons why people fall down in that pit of following an authoritarian leader. And it does a good job of humanizing them, but at the same time, it's like, it never quite humanizes them enough that you really get invested in their story.
Well, a couple of them you do.
A little bit. I guess Rosemary a little bit.
Rosemary and then the doctor, I'd say, are...
But you really felt for the doctor.
I felt for the doctor because that's another diverging path in the movie and in the book. In the movie, they pretty much tie her as this, like, Mother Teresa kind of character of, in this horrible concentration camp, she was a part of the experiments, but she didn't want to take part, but she wanted to help the people that were there. And in the book, she felt bad for the people, but she still did the experiments, and only in hindsight did she feel the weight of what she had done.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier. I got this impression from her, from the short part, that like as a young doctor, she was like, these experiments are horrible and they're causing suffering, but we'll learn from them and then I'll be able to save more people. And then 30 years down the line, you got an older doctor who realizes, we didn't actually learn anything useful from those, and I just kind of tortured people for no reason.
Actually, oddly enough, not 30. 5.
35?
No, just 5 years away.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought V was like 20 years later or something.
Nope. 5.
Oh, okay. Damn.
V worked fast.
Too fast, too furious, Tokyo Drift. Mm-hmm. Right out of the concentration camps.
Yeah, I mean, he also had, like, after taking all those LSD drugs, he had, like, a beautiful mind moment where he had all, like, these plans for getting out of the... Like, it was ridiculous.
He got everything together. It's fine. But yeah, you really felt for that character.
I did. I felt she was very... I just felt bad because she was attempting to bring a light to it, and she just didn't see how bad she was until afterwards, which sucks, and it's always sucks to do that. Hindsight is 2020, but 2020 isn't very soft, as we can tell in this year.
And then, of course, there's Finch, who does sort of have that realization that he had messed up and everything, but only after he drops LSD.
Yeah.
Which is one of the really weird parts about this, where it kind of implies that, like, you need to do drugs and free your mind in order to really understand the universe. And I can never get on board with that.
Nah, I've already done too many of them to be I'm just like, my mind's already too open, man. I can't go any farther.
Between the Quaaludes and the ketamine, I can't think anymore. My brain's so expanded it's touching the walls, man. Fuzzy walls just rubbing my brain. It's hard to sleep.
I'm thinking for you. I'm thinking for me. I'm thinking for everybody, man. I'm just feeling it. No,
Yeah, but I don't know. At least for me, well, I mean, that's the weird thing. Like, I have a very philosophical standpoint against not only drugs but even like alcohol.
Yeah.
And somewhat even soda to a lesser extent. Like I drink soda obviously, but I stick away from like energy drinks and high caffeine things.
Yeah.
Cuz I just don't like the idea of having a substance affect my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I need to be as clear as possible to think clearly, and adding in another substance isn't going to help that.
Oddly enough, I'm of that same camp, and it is kind of weird to see this book about, like, do what you feel like and do what you feel like, but you have to do drugs to understand how everything is bad. And it's like...
Well, that's the thing is, like, They never really say quite that that's what you need. I think it might have just been like, that's what Finch needed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was so stuck in his ways that the only way he was going to think outside the box was with a little help.
Yeah. Admittedly, though, to put all that aside, all of the drugs and such, the sequence for that moment of his realization.
That whole chapter is really, really well done. And it's, I've talked about how the coloring doesn't kind of seem to fit. And it's because, again, this was made in black and white. And then when they did the coloring, it almost feels like they watercolored over it. And so you get a lot of these, like, for someone's facial tones, it's just sort of like a shifting tone and it doesn't match.
Kind of pastel, kind of, yeah. Like
yeah.
this.
But for the drug trips, it works perfectly.
Oh, yeah.
There's something about it that just gives this nostalgic view, and then especially at the end where he sort of like comes to the realization that he's actually free, that he doesn't fear death, and he's running around naked in the sunlight, like something about those bright, vibrant pastels.
For me, it's the actual, like, there's that sequence where he's looking at the wall and he's seeing all the people move far away that he just knew he would have missed seeing. He does miss seeing.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The ethereal nature of them is just contrasted rather well with, like, the very bright and vibrant.
That is something I wanted to talk, because this is a good book, but it didn't really move me all that much.
Not really.
Except for this scene.
Yeah.
This scene was the one that sort of, like, got me a little choked up a little bit. That seems to be happening to me more and more as I get older, and I'm not sure if it's just because I'm reading books better, or if my old age I'm getting a soft heart.
Oh, no, I think it's just your experiences are starting to color your life a bit more, my friend.
Perhaps. But yeah, there's a point where he's going through the remnants of the old concentration camp on LSD.
The wonder drug.
Yeah, the wonder drug. And, I obviously we read Mouse last year, and through my life, I've seen not just real depictions of, like, Holocausts and stuff, but fictional stories that try to make you feel the weight of, like, 10,000 people died or 1 million people died. And it never quite works very well. You go into Star Wars, and no matter how many times they blow up a planet, you can't really feel the weight of all those lives that are lost. Like, it's important to the characters, but you don't personally feel it.
Nothing's ever really gonna hit that same way as seeing 1,000 pairs of shoes sitting in a pile.
Well, again, it's I see that stuff, and it has, like, a weight to it. It feels sad. But it's never quite hit me in the way that this does. It's just he has this vision of all the people that are gone.
Mm-hmm.
In this fascist dictatorship. They killed all the people of color, all the gay, bisexual people. And he has this vision of all these people, like, smiling and happy and giving him hugs and welcoming him, and then walking away from him.
Yeah.
And you can just see this, like, the world getting less vibrant.
Yes.
Where this realization hits him that, like, the world isn't as good as it used to be with all these colorful, interesting people gone. There's something... Again, there's just something inherently wrong with the world when you've taken out all the variety and left with just... Uniformity. And reading this, it just kind of made me think of, like, my entire lifetime, and what if every person of color, every gay person I know was, like, gone? And, like, how much objectively worse my life would be. Like, how many fewer smiles and laughs and good times I would have had with, like, those friends and those coworkers and those classmates just all gone.
Well, I could tell you that I've specifically stayed away from each of them. No, it's innumerable, and this really does give you that weight of this, like, hole in a life, as opposed to the whole of seeing, like, so many dead bodies and so. Yeah. This is it just takes the cost and flips it.
There's the shock of human life being gone, and then there's the shock of the world is gone.
Mm-hmm.
The world that we knew.
The shock of variety and beauty and just...
It's so weird, too, because I'm not usually moved by, like, oh, the beauty and the things in the world, and we're all different and sunshine, but this managed to hit it in a way that just, like, straight to the heart.
That moment hit for me a little bit, but not near as much as, The Inch.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that hits really hard, too, but that's one of the few things... They almost word for word...
used it in the movie.
Used it in the movie.
And for that, you really just can't fault them for that, because it was just such a compelling way of doing it.
Yeah, and
if not
I guess we should mention, if you don't know what we're talking about by the inch, there's a part where Evie is put in prison. It basically recreates what happened to V in the concentration camps, where it's starved, waterboarded, interrogated for hours, just locked alone in a cell.
Minus the magical LSD.
Yeah, minus the experimentations. And the only thing she has to comfort her is someone who wrote an autobiography on a piece of toilet paper, like a roll of toilet paper that just gets slipped in through a hole between the cells. And it's just this young woman who's like, I don't know who you are, but I love you. I love everything about this world and all the people in it, and I'm sorry that I'll never get to meet you. And it talks about how, you know, they can take everything from you in this prison. They can take, like, you know, your name, your family, your history, but there's 1 inch left of you of integrity, of what you actually believe, and they can never take that from you if you don't give it away.
Yeah.
If you don't let them. And yeah, that hits pretty hard. The only reason it didn't hit harder is because, again, I had seen it before.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's been dulled, but it's like a sword being dulled. Like, still gonna hit you.
It's still very sharp.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually, when I said I've seen bits and pieces of this movie, my dad turned over the TV right with her in prison, and I had no idea it was V for Vendetta, and I just saw that part. That was the first part I saw, and I was like, what the heck is this movie? And then V came on, and I was like, what?
Admittedly, yeah, like, the sequence, and also the, to go back on the art of that, like, the sequence of her standing in the rain naked is very, just like him standing in, like, the Stonehenge, which is really weird, but in the sunlight, just completely free and naked as well.
Well, she's not naked, she's wearing, like, a sack, but it's, like, raining, so...
No, actually, she's completely naked.
Is she?
Yeah. In the comic, she's completely naked. In the movie, because Natalie Portman doesn't want to be naked on camera in the rain. Who wants to?
That's cold.
That's cold, and yeah.
But yeah, that is one thing that the movie did well, because I watched a thing about the differences beforehand to sort of get a refresher. And you're talking about how in the movie they juxtapose her standing in the rain with her hands up in a V, of course.
Oh yeah.
She does that, and then V does the same pose when he breaks out of he blows up the concentration camp.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's a really intelligent prisoner. They start trusting him with stuff. They let him grow plants and everything, and he uses the fertilizer to make a bomb. Blows the hell out of the thing.
And then he went on to write the Anarchist Cookbook.
Yes. But yeah, there's the scene of him, like, walking out of the fire and raising his hands up like victory.
Mm-hmm.
And they juxtapose that with her in the rain, where it's like they both had this rebirth moment
Fire
where they became
and water.
the V, but V's was fire because he's the explosion, he's the intensity, and then hers is the water washing away everything afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And Finch is the light.
Yeah. In the book, in the movie, Finch is just a really upset dude. Who's just back on the characters is that, like, very few of them get a characterization.
Or if they do, there's that one Scottish guy, and every time he was on in the frame, I just hated it because I had to read his, like, Cockney accent.
He was not Scottish, but he was Cockney.
Cockney, or I guess, I don't know, I've heard him described as Scottish, I've heard him described as Cockney. Either way, they write out the accent, and it's like, I have to go back and reread his things 2 or 3 times.
As a person who loves accents, I actually really appreciated that. But I actually thought that at the end it would turn out that because in the movie V does this kind of face pull thing where, like, he feeds information to the government pretending to be a different, like, informant. But in the book, I thought that Cockney accent guy, he was going to pull off a mask and it was going to be V. But no, the reason as to how he has all the information in the world is so much stranger.
Because they have the supercomputer.
And he somehow hacked it, and they don't show how.
Yeah, that's, again, going back to the plot and stuff. you have this fascist government that is set up where the leader, Adam Susan, gets all his power from the Fate supercomputer. And the computer feeds him all this information from all the surveillance programs. They mention that literally everyone has a camera in their homes watching them.
Yeah.
And even on the street corners and stuff. And V turns all the cameras off and is like, you're free to do whatever you want now. No one's watching.
I do like the little girl who in the movie, she just draws a V on this wall and she's like, but in the book she's just like, bollocks. No one said me?
She just like whispers it in front of the camera, like very nervously.
And then just goes full on. It's like, bollocks mom, bollocks dad, bollocks everyone.
Everything is bollocks. And then she writes a V.
Yeah.
And then runs off into the night, never to be seen again.
Surprisingly adorable for what that is.
Yeah, that was a really good scene. It made you feel more for that random character you never see than most of the other side characters.
Because we've all been a kid where we're just like, man, mom and dad.
Just like, I could swear now.
Yeah.
No one's around.
After I censored myself. But
yeah, the supercomputer in general was really strange because, the whole setup was that there was a big global nuclear war and the country kind of fell apart, and that's why the fascists took power. And yet somehow they have this, like, highly advanced supercomputer. And I don't know, like, did Adam Susan make it? Is that why he's the dictator? Is it something that someone else made and he just controls it? Did they have it before? Did they only get it afterwards?
I have a theory. The theory is that the nuclear bombs came together after the war and thought they needed a computer. There's no explanation. They just...
And I mean, to be fair, they don't really need an explanation, but I felt like you could have exercised the Fate computer and replaced it with something else.
Yeah.
And the story wouldn't have been much worse for it.
I mean, you don't have to go in depth with it, but to keep the suspension of disbelief going a little bit better, you could have thrown in a little bit something like...
Yeah.
The only thing that kept kept Britain safe during this time was our greatest scientist's invention, the Fate computer, and then done. Yeah. You don't need more than that. Yeah.
Something like that. So yeah, you're already kind of suspending your disbelief to be like, yes, this almost post-apocalyptic society has a giant supercomputer, and then V has one of his own.
Yeah.
It's like, where did he get that? How did he learn hacking skills?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a computer hooked up to the internet? They didn't even have the internet.
It's weird.
It's like the early 80s computers. They didn't really understand anything.
Yeah, like if you can hack something in 5 minutes and if 5 people try and hack it, then it takes only 1 minute. Hackers is dumb.
You ever hacked the subway from a payphone?
Oh, God. Hack the world, man. Hack the world.
So I guess we wrote this down beforehand, like, because of that. Because V always seems to be one step ahead, he's got a plan for everything. He kind of feels like Alan Moore's Batman.
Yes, and like Batman nowadays, not like the original Batman. The Batman where it's just like, hey, guess what? The world's going to hell. Well, Batman has like 5 plans for that. That's fine.
He's what I like to call Justice League Batman.
Yes.
Where, like, in order to compete with the superheroes, they put him as this superhuman intellect who has a plan to kill everyone twice, just in case they happen to go evil.
And a third plan that only he knows.
Yeah, that he doesn't even know about, that he removed his own memories and then trusted Alfred with. And it would, like, activate on contingency that he didn't say a certain password every day.
Just, like, ridiculous stuff. And then V does this type of stuff, like, on the regular.
Yeah. Although this, again, that kind of goes back to how influential this is. Reading it now, it feels like V is Alan Moore's version of Batman.
Mm-hmm.
But considering this came out in, like, 81... before you had, like, Batman Year Zero, before The Dark Knight Returns. Like, you could tell Frank Miller read V for Vendetta. You could tell that the guy who made Batman Begins, what was that director's name? I'm so bad with names.
He was Nolan.
Yeah. You could tell that Nolan had read V for Vendetta. That whole idea of, like, you're not a man in a mask, you're an idea, and they can't kill an idea. Like, yeah.
That's V.
That's exactly V. And I can't think of any superhero that did it before then. I'm sure he probably got the idea from somewhere, but...
Yeah, it's just this, I don't know, V is this intangible thing that could not be stopped even by other people's plans that seemed to be perfect. Because his plans were always superseding their plans.
They were one step ahead.
Mm-hmm. It's simultaneously incredibly compelling and incredibly frustrating towards the suspension of disbelief. I know I keep saying that, but it's for an idealist comic. But
yeah. I mean, that's the thing. This isn't like Lord of the Flies, where it's all the ideals and you literally give no shits about the characters. Like, you're invested enough that you can kind of ignore this stuff while you're reading through it. It's just the fact that, like, as we're going back to discuss things, the first thing you think of when you start, like, taking apart the plot is like, oh yeah, this definitely didn't make any sense.
Yeah, like, they're super...
And I mean, there's a lot of great stories that are like that. When you think of Citizen Kane, one of the best movies ever, and then there's a plot hole in the first 10 seconds, where he whispers Rosebud after the maid leaves, and then everyone's like, his last words were Rosebud. It's like, how do you know that? He was literally alone when he said it.
He spoke him into the
snow globe,
and it was a recorder somehow.
And then when it broke, it released the Rosebud into the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, it literally starts with a plot hole, but it doesn't matter because you get so invested.
Yeah.
And by the way, because I don't have a movie podcast, if you have not watched Citizen Kane, I would highly recommend it. I sat down like, okay, greatest movie ever, let's see what you got, and came away like, well, damn, that is the greatest movie ever.
And I came away from it being like, wow, yeah, they're right. All of these different, like, techniques for it. Like, wow, this is
just the techniques, but the characterization.
Yeah,
like, I didn't think I would find myself so invested in the story.
The makeup and the
camera work, the shadows and everything.
Welcome to our podcast about Citizen Kane here.
Welcome to Citizen Kane review, hidden stealthily inside of V for Vendetta.
Yeah,
this is the anarchist review. We review what we want. No leaders. Only men and women.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we've kind of gotten a little too far off track, and I'm not really sure what else we have to say about this.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about this kind of book, is that it's very thin, but it's also very, like, because it's so thin, it spreads across so much that you can get off on several different tangents because it connects to so many different things, and is very universal. Somehow it's more universal than the upbeat Universal movie where it's like your V, everyone's V. This is very...
Yeah, somehow this... I don't know. The thing that struck me the most about this is on the second page where they're introducing they're establishing the world you're in.
Mm-hmm.
They're establishing that this is a totalitarian dictatorship. It's based off fascism. You can hear the news, the voice of fate talking to people. And it ends its thing with, like, together we can make England great again.
Ooh.
And it's like, man, I when people were calling Trump, like, a fascist or whatever, I was like, you're over-exaggerating. Like, he's not that bad. But you really do see how, like, people can see those slogans when it's something people were aware of in the 80s.
Yeah.
That this idea of hearkening back to the past and being greater through being more authoritarian, like, it really appealed to people, and that's what they were using. And the fact that he's using that, whether it's on purpose or just because he's a goofball, maybe a goofball is too good a word for an idiot. I try not to insult the man, because I know a lot of people do think he's, like, brilliant somehow, but it does kind of feel like he's never read a book before.
Yeah.
I get the impression he mostly watches TV and movies.
If he's not in it, he's not interested.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess this episode isn't as long as the other ones, but, like, we got everything that we wanted to talk about, really.
I mean, that's the reason for December.
Yeah.
We give them a good chunk, but we don't take up as much of their time.
There's a lot to talk about, but it's not quite as meaty as I had expected. And like I said, it just doesn't go in depth as much as we would have hoped. But still very good. Still would recommend.
4 out of 10. 4 out of 10. 4 out of 5 for me.
I was gonna say 4 out of 10.
Yes.
You gotta get at least a 2 out of 2.
1.5 out of 99. It'll be great. No.
I got a scale. You either get a 1 out of 2 or a 2 out of 2. This one, 2 out of 2.
This one is a 4 out of 8. What?
4 out of 8. It did twice as good as my expectations.
But no, join us next time. What are we going to be getting at?
I don't know, actually. I've been so wrapped up in doing this. I think we're going to have another poll. We're going to ask people what they want. This time, instead of limiting it to graphic novels, I'm just going to go on the Discord and be like, hey, any suggestions, and see what books we come up with.
So let's try and come together as a community and actually... let's get a book reviewed. Something that we'll all sit down and read for the new year.
Well, by the time this comes out, I think that poll will already have been there. But I should have it in the pinned comment. I'll say what we're going to do. Should be an actual book. You and me are both working on Wheel of Time behind the scenes, though.
Actually, I've stopped on doing a bit of the Wheel of Time just because I wanted to get this done before everything. But now I'm going to jam out.
I finished V for Vendetta in 3 days, and now I'm working on The Path of Daggers.
Oh, God.
I'm 100 pages in.
Okay, so you're not as far as
No, it's kind of slow. But yeah, we're going to get all 3 of the next Wheel of Time books together, and in the meantime, we'll be doing some other stuff.
Probably
who knows?
March, February.
Yeah, probably March at least. April maybe. We'll wait a while. The Wheel of Time stuff isn't that popular because the Wheel of Time show isn't out yet. I'm really hoping that takes off. But yeah, either way, until next time, keep reading. And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
I think this will be out a couple days after Christmas, but Merry Christmas anyway. And a
happy
New
holidays.
Year. And a Happy New Year.
That too.